The Introvert Advantage. That was a book I read in middle school, I believe. I was an avid reader, lots of sci-fi, lots of books that maybe would have considered to be a little bit mature for me at the time, but it was all good, nothing extreme. The Introvert Advantage introduced to me the concept of those two ideas, that framework of categorizing people as introverts or extroverts or somewhere on the spectrum, or ambiverts. That was another word that was brought up. And I concluded that I was very much an introvert. I was painfully shy and awkward as a kid for various reasons that I understand very well now. Being raised by parents who were extraordinarily traumatized themselves. They had very little framework of how to be healthy individuals themselves. So, as I read, I gained new insight into myself. I was able to examine my life, my behavior from a third-person perspective or from an objective perspective. How's it going? I was able to see myself from a different angle, from this new framework. And of course it was beneficial to me because it was introducing this concept of introversion as an advantage. And I don't think it's very difficult to see how in our modern culture, in American culture, it's oftentimes seen as maybe a negative to be introverted or quiet. People that are rambunctious and loud are often rewarded, which, there's a whole discussion to be had there, but I was able to see myself in a positive light. I'd have to go back and reread this book, but some of the concepts it mentioned were about how introverts listen, how they tend to process things more deeply, how they tend to be perceptive of the emotions of others. They can be more sensitive. So under this framework, I was able to break outside my box. It was an advantage for me to be able to see myself in a positive light, and looking back now with the language I can use around it, unconditional positive regard. I was able to see myself free of judgment. It was just simply a categorization. I saw it as a disadvantage, though, how quiet I was, how introverted, how painfully shy, and the struggles that I had making friends. So I wanted to change it. And I set about changing this aspect of myself by simply speaking more. And what that means was something would pop into my head and I'd say it. Not in terms of random outbursts, but things that I could say to start a conversation. At school, I would be in social situations, or not in class. I wasn't disruptive like that, but in places where it was acceptable to be with your friends, be talkative. Instead of saying silent, I would speak my mind of my opinion on something, or hey, I noticed this thing, or whatever it was. And that fit pretty well into my bid to be accepted by the popular kids. I saw who they were and what they were and how happy they were and how everyone liked them. But did they really? But I wanted that. I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part of the in-group, the cool kids. I wanted to have a lot of friends. I wanted to be accepted and liked. And I had a degree of success. I made an effort to have more proximity to these people, sit with them at lunch, talk with them, group with them in class, and they accepted me. They were kind to me. It's interesting to look back now and realize that they were accepting as kind as they could be. They didn't treat everyone that way, and I think maybe part of it had to do with the fact that I'm conventionally attractive, so I've been told. So there's an advantage for me. I think that process that I went through might not be accessible to everyone, but it factors into my journey, my story, and that's what it was. And it was very beneficial for me to have that empowerment to say, hey, I wanted to do this thing. I wanted to have friends. I wanted to change my situation, and it happened. I was no longer as inert as I was before. It capacitated me. It allowed me to see I can change my circumstance in subtle ways. I was still a teenager. I couldn't move out or move to a different state or get a job or whatever. So in this process of being accepted by the cool kids, I neglected and maybe abandoned some friendships, and there were some hurt feelings, some of which have been repaired. I've had that conversation before, and yeah, but it was an interesting time of my life to reach out, to strike out on my own, if you will, of no longer being fit into this little mold of the quiet kid, or not really a person. I didn't really have that feeling of that I was a real person in my childhood. I was just kind of existed in a certain capacity. My parents didn't really talk with me very much or around me. They're very isolated individuals, very wounded people, like I'd said before. So this whole campaign was to strike out against that. I didn't realize that at the time it was more just about consciously what it was to me.